Hi, I'm Patrick, and this is the Mach-E vlog. One big issue with trying to get EV adoption to be widespread is what to do if you have like multi-family housing. Like, how can you get charging installed there? We're going to take a look at that today. It's very exciting. It's with a company called Pando Electric, and we're here at one of their first installs in East Palo Alto, California. So let's go. We're here with Tom Herbst. You've been an EV driver for many years, right?
Yeah, 8 years.
8 years. So, and you bought a property here. You don't actually live here right now, but you will at some point or potentially. Exactly. But you have EV charging at home. Right. But there wasn't EV charging here.
Right. So my wife drives a plug-in hybrid Pacifica, and I have a Model 3.
Nice.
And yeah, we thought eventually we might move out of the area, and we'd want to spend more time in this complex. And we're very concerned that we wouldn't be able to charge our cars if we're here. So
it's a very realistic concern for a lot of people when they're looking for a place to live, especially because there's really not really good solutions for multifamily housing. But you guys found a solution, and it's installed here, or at least phase one.
Right.
So we should go down and take a look.
Yeah, great.
Okay, now we're in the parking garage. So here's one of the units that you guys installed. So how would somebody use this?
So what they'll do is they'll provide their own EVSE. So I'm assuming that most people are going to buy a portable EVSE and plug in, and they register on the app. And then if they're ready to charge, they have the EVSE plugged in their car and into the wall here. Then they can request charge on their app. And if there's no contention, if the circuit is available, they can charge right away. And if there is contention, so basically the circuit can't provide enough power at that time, then it'll schedule charging later in the day.
That's pretty cool. So basically it's like, if this were filled with a bunch of EVs, everybody's charging, and I came in, it would say like, you gotta wait.
Right, exactly.
Okay, but as we can see right now, there's not a ton of people with EVs, so.
Yeah, I think in this building, of the 30 that we've installed, there are 4 EVs.
Four EVs.
Yeah.
But it's really nice. Like what I really like about this is that you don't have to fight for a space that has one. And if the complex, because I think that's one of the things that is really cool about Pando is that they're making sure that these are available everywhere. And that's something that was important to you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the solutions that we looked at previously was some shared chargers that people could drive up and charge and then move, and just really didn't want to go that route. It was more expensive and less convenient, and I guess I've been an EV owner for 8 years, and one of the things I always like is every morning I go to my car, it's fully ready to go.
Right.
That
it's the secret. Like everybody wants to talk about range anxiety, but they don't talk about the secret power.
Yeah, I think, except for going to the gas station, I haven't been to the gas station. So getting gas for the lawnmower is the only reason I've gone to a gas station in the last 7 or 8 years. So.
Now, when we were in Colorado, we tried to convince our HOA to put in some EVSEs, and their reaction was like, how are we going to put them in? How are we going to decide who gets one? Right. So how was your HOA when you approached them about putting this in?
Yeah, so I was observing a board meeting, and I mentioned that we should probably consider looking at how we wanted to deal with EVs in the future. And I mentioned that in California, we have what's called a right to charge law, which means that any resident or owner can insist on being provided the access to charging. And so you're expected to negotiate how that's provided, but the homeowners association can't just turn it down.
Right.
And I said, if you don't get ahead of this and plan how it's going to be done, then it's just going to be done willy-nilly.
And you're going to be scrambling.
Yeah. And you'll be reacting, and you'll end up with a spider web of conduit and wire, and how you charge people back, and it's just going to get unnecessarily complicated. So you really need a plan. And unfortunately, they agreed with me and said, "Yeah, Tom, why don't you go figure that out?" So 2.5 years later, we finally figured it out.
That's very cool. And you were saying, earlier off camera that some of the first solutions, it was very expensive, and that exact situation where it's like you could put in 4.
Yeah, or one of the proposals was level 1 charging, and it's like, if it's level 1 charging, why bother? Right? Yeah. It's just a waste of time and money. And frankly, not that much less infrastructure to level 1 than level 2. You still have to run conduit and run wire to every spot.
That's true, yeah.
And so it just didn't really make any sense. I mean, I've known some people who had EVs and they try to go on level 1 and have them not show up to work because they weren't charged in the morning.
We survived on level 1, but we were working from home, so our commute was a little bit different. So now you're involved with the HOA. How has the response been? First of all, from the HOA, was everybody receptive? And then
initially, I got some pretty strong pushback of building has other problems. Why are we looking at putting all this money towards a non-problem? But one of the things that really moved it forward was that we have a very supportive municipal corporation here called Peninsula Clean Energy. Mm-hmm. And I had to understand how their incentives worked and kind of what they wanted us to accomplish, which was to have charging ready, not just infrastructure, but actual the ability for somebody to charge with no more work. I had to figure out their incentive structure, and then when I went back and explained what incentive money was available, the homeowners went from why would we solve this non-existent problem to we better get that money while it's available. You better sign that today.
Yeah, and if there's incentives, I mean, that's the whole point. Is it incentivizes.
And so we move forward, and so
that's really great. So, as we were talking about, it's there were a lot of expensive options,
right?
Besides the incentives, the cost was pretty attractive on this as well. Because we don't need to mention some of the other companies, but when they're putting in a $700. Not a $700 that I could buy, but if you put one in this type of use, the price is way more expensive.
Right. I mean, one of the things also is I didn't really want to be in the EVSE business, and I also didn't want to be prescriptive in EVSEs. So with this solution, the only concern I have is, will people buy EVSEs that are dumb enough, right? That will they accept having the power externally turned on and turned off, and providing charging as soon as they're turned on? Because I know that the EVSEs that I have in my house, they get a little confused when the power goes on and off.
Yeah.
And I'm not connected to Wi-Fi yet or whatever.
Yeah.
And no, the units that connect to this will need to be pretty dumb. So my understanding is the Tesla portable charger works pretty well, and there are some others that are, again, dumb enough. But
the one that we have with our Mach-E, it's from Ford, but it's actually a company that provides them for lots and lots of other cars.
Okay.
And it's dumb.
Yeah.
And it's 32 amps.
Yeah.
But it's you plug it in. If it's power, it's good. If there's no power, it's good.
And so I think that would work really well with this system.
Yeah. So it sounds like a really great solution. And what I really like is that, again, it's every single spot has one. These are assigned spots, but if you had, I haven't looked around, but have you thought about our guest spots or anything like that to have some?
So we are adding sockets for the handicap spots.
Oh, nice.
In general, we've kind of avoided, so first of all, sometimes we have people who park too long in the guest spots, and so we don't want to encourage that.
Oh, okay. Makes sense.
There were a whole different set of regulation if we went outside of the deeded spots. And so we decided to just stay in our lane and just do the deeded spots and have the rules be really clear. And as we didn't want to end up having to put spots outside in the unassigned parking and other things that would have gotten complicated.
Now, as we look around, there are a lot of gas cars. You said there's about 4 EVs. Do you think this might be something that could push people over the hurdle of getting an EV now that there's easier charging available?
I certainly think so. And I think that in general, what if we have 90 spots here? What is it? I think in California now, about 20% of new car purchases are EV, right?
Yeah, it's getting up there.
Just along with that, I think that we'll definitely see an increased population. But I've got a very positive response from the existing EV owners, and I would expect that people will convert now.
Yeah, and talking to them, where were they charging before?
So there, just a couple miles here, there is a supercharger, and so for the people with Teslas, I'm pretty sure they're going there. I don't really know where the lady with the e-tron goes.
I'll look, because we have a Mach-E, so we can use either. Okay. So I'll take a look, because I know in the San Diego area where we're at, there's a lot of people that don't have charging at home.
Right.
And as soon as work's out, they're over there flooding the superchargers and the Electrify Americas, trying to get their juice for the week. So I can imagine how much of a bonus that would be to have a condo and just be able to.
Yeah, one of the owners told me it'll save her about 3 hours a week.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's definitely that type of savings. If you're not sitting there to supercharge, they do have electric motorcycles that could use this as well. So, thank you for sharing this.
Yeah,
and really, I think the biggest thing is thank you for taking the initiative and being one of the first to get this through at a HOA to where like everybody has the opportunity to charge. And that's really commendable on your part.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, now we're here with Joseph Nagle with Pando Electric. We've been talking about these devices. Now we're going to learn a little bit more about them because they're the company that came up with this idea. Do you want to walk us through like where this idea originated and then the device itself?
Yeah, of course. Like what we actually did originally was look at how single-family homeowners are charging their vehicles. And what we found was over 70% of them are actually just using a simple plug. Mm-hmm. And so it didn't make a lot of sense when we started to look around a lot of the apartment complexes. They were just installing what you would normally see in like a public setting, like a grocery store, a movie theater, or what have you, into those spaces, which tend to be very, very expensive. And so we thought that this was kind of backwards. If everybody at home is just using a plug, and multifamily housing is homes for people, why are we putting in these very expensive stations when we could get away with just a simple plug? And so that's what we created with the Pando Smart Outlet.
That's very cool. Yeah, and that's what we've been talking about is like there's one at pretty much every single parking space here. So that's super cool. Gives you a lot of flexibility. Now, one of the things you were saying is like if we all came in and this was filled with EVs one day, and we all wanted to charge. You guys are doing some type of load balancing.
Correct, yeah. So basically what it's going to do is each person who's going to come in, they'll set a chart, they'll start charging, and it'll start letting people charge as it fills up. Once it hits its max capacity, it won't allow new charging stations to come online.
Right.
And then it'll slowly start to roll off the original people who came in and start to turn on the other ones that came on. And so by doing that over a long enough period of time, you get everybody enough charge. Most people get full charge by the morning.
And yeah, like for us, even if we're going out doing a bunch of things, we may need 60 miles. So, that's, like 20 kilowatt hours. We can get that in about an hour. We don't need a 6-hour time window. We need an hour and we're good.
Right. And that's what's really great about using the 1450 as the socket type rather than say like a 620 or a 520, which is much lower level 1 stations, because it can provide a lot of power in a shorter amount of time. And what a lot of people don't realize is that they don't really drive all that far in a day. Like the average American's going about 40, 45 miles each day. To replace that energy is pretty simple. Yeah, especially with like this type of a device, an hour, maybe 2 tops. And so when you look at it from that perspective, it's actually very easy to put in a whole bunch of stations on a limited capacity.
Right. And of course, the other thing that everybody's worried about is like, how is it being paid for? But I noticed there's a barcode and there's an app. So
absolutely, yeah. So I can start talking about a little bit of our partner, Peninsula Clean Energy, and how this, like the whole infrastructure here was paid for, because they did a really good job. What they did was they created an incentive program that was specifically for outlets. And it's not something that was really widely done across the U.S. In fact, so far I've only seen it really in California. But they were one of the pioneers of going after that type of a device for multifamily housing. And they're giving significant incentive monies to do it. Even though those incentive monies are more or less on par with what you would get from like, a ChargePoint or a Blink or whomever, because of the nature of the device, we can install a lot more of these. They're a lot lower cost. So we can actually fill in an entire garage 30, 60, 92 chargers on this site for the same cost as 7 of those traditional stations.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and they did it all through their incentive program. So we're really thankful for Peninsula Clean Energy and the thoughtfulness that they put into writing those incentives.
So, but as an individual like driver, for them to pay for their charging use, that's where you have the barcode.
Absolutely, yeah. So when you come in with your car for the first time, you scan the app, you scan the barcode, you download our app, you put in some simple payment information, and then you can start your first charge. Every time after that, you just come in and scan, plug in your car, and you walk away.
That's perfect.
These all have built-in metering capabilities, so they're actually actively tracking all the energy that's passing through. Each individual driver, let's say driver A comes in and plugs in, and then driver B uses the same outlet for some odd reason, even though they don't need to. They would actually be charged separately. So the outlet knows who's using it and when,
and
it's accounting for everybody's charge sessions. We bill them at the end of each month, and then we reimburse the property for the energy that they used.
So a situation like this, where it's like this spot belongs to apartment 4, it's not as big as of a deal. But like if it were like everybody has access to whatever parking space, it could still deal with that type of situation.
Yeah, absolutely. If we were to install, say, in the publicly available spaces or the community spaces, it can handle that type of a system. But we typically try to recommend one-to-one charging because we found that it just makes EV driving a lot more enjoyable when you know for a fact once you come home, there's a charger that's going to be ready and available to you, not something that you're going to have to figure out, what do I do if it's not available?
Yeah, we talked about that with our HOA before we left Colorado, and they were like, well, if we only put 2 or 3, like how do we encourage people not to use them every single night? How do we like divvy them up? But if there's 1 per spot, then it makes it a lot easier.
100%. And I think that's one of the things that comes about because of how expensive those charging stations were initially.
Right.
And so the property wasn't trying to do that to make it more inconvenient for EV drivers. They were doing it because they were budget constrained. They're like, we can only afford 2 or 3 of these things, or else we have to upgrade our entire building energy infrastructure.
And I assume there's like flexibility. So like here, the idea is like somebody has a portable charger, but you could support somebody putting a wall-mounted charger if that's what they wanted to, and the HOA allowed it, or where.
Totally. I mean, if you wanted to plug in another charger into our charger, you can do that. And I always tell people the charger's actually in the car anyway, so
yeah, exactly.
This is plugs and plugs, but
it's plugs and plugs. Yeah, it's not like Europe where it's actually just a cable. But and it looks like it's pretty rugged design if we want to look at the design here. But I mean, basically it's just a simple plug with some extra stuff around it and a little light.
Absolutely, and that's really all you need. And we designed this specifically, even though this is a very wide open garage, we designed this to fit into really tight spaces.
Right.
Because there's plenty of places across the U.S., garages underground especially, that get really tight, and putting in like a big bulky station is just not going to work.
Yeah.
And so by having something that's so sleek and small, can fit onto a wall or a pillar like that, it makes it a lot more easy to install for everybody involved in that situation.
Very cool. And just simple enough. It's like scan to charge, has an indicator light, not much to it from a consumer side.
Right.
It's just like it handles everything in this home.
Right, and everything that was done here was done purposefully. It's really to just strip down the cost as much as possible, because that's really the key to getting into properties like this. This property paid less than $500 for each one of these to be installed.
Wow.
So we're talking about really driving down the cost to their absolute bare minimum. And you have to be able to strip like all the fancy bells and whistles out and give people really the simplest thing that they need, which is access to energy.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, thinking about the $500, there's so many people, they're getting their installs done at a house and they're paying way more than that. So that's a pretty impressive cost point.
Right.
And then I just bring my EVSE, my charger that's not a charger, and plug in. So that's really cool. And how is this? Okay, this is one of the first installs that you guys have done, and you're looking at more, to find more projects and more locations. California, I guess, has a lot of incentives, but are you going nationwide, and how is this going?
It's going really well. I've only been here for about 6 months. We're already, well into the hundreds of stations. We have nearly 1,000 already booked, all across the U.S. There's states that you wouldn't even think of, Louisiana. Some places in Texas are coming online really strongly. So when I read a lot of the news about EVs or, they're hitting a slowdown and people really don't like them, we're not seeing that.
Right.
We're actually seeing the adoption rates are going way up. It's more, I think, just a reconfiguring of people's mindset.
Yeah.
And letting the chargers come in first, and then they'll be able to buy the vehicles, because it's not a great situation to buy a vehicle and not have a charger at home.
Yeah, I mean, this is something we've been hitting on for a while. A lot of people will buy some of these cars that have like free charging, or that they have to go drive and go put it in, and they're realizing like that's a great perk, but it just is not very convenient. And a lot of people this is the only way they're going to be able to charge. So I think it's really great to provide this solution that we desperately need, and it's a huge untapped market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other big thing I read recently, of people were being asked, well, how long does it take to charge your EV? And someone had a really great quip back, was like, well, it takes me about 5 seconds. I come home, I plug in my charger, and I go inside. And then it just does its own thing. Because a lot of the things that we're thinking about here, we're talking about a complete change of how the vehicles work in general.
Yeah.
They're more like your cell phone than they are like a gas car.
That's the one that I sort of tell people, is like, they're like, how long does it take your car to charge at home? And I'm like, well, how long does it take your phone to charge? They're like, I don't know. It's just ready when I wake up. I'm like, yeah, the car's the same way. It's like, it's literally the exact same concept.
Absolutely. And I think once people start to think of it in that aspect, then the light bulbs go off and they're like, oh, I actually get it now. The charging stations out in the world are for like long road trips or emergency top-offs or anything like that. Whereas having a charger at home is just like having my phone charger at home.
Well, I think for a lot of us, or a lot of people that work in or live in multifamily housing, it can be a big hurdle to try to convince your HOA to take on a project like this. Do you guys have any advice or any information that they can use to go to their HOA board?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of, first of all, always check for incentives. That really helps. Ask your other residents around you, like if they are interested in getting an EV charger, because the more people that join in, you can start to drive down the costs. And the big one that people often forget is that these are actually a value add to the complex.
Yeah.
So I think we just released a blog post, and you can go on to pandoelectric.com and actually check it out. But I think it's around $360,000 can be added to the value of the property by adding charging stations.
Oh, wow.
And I think it's about every 30 chargers is around there.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's definitely something like if you have an EV, especially, you move one city to the next, even if you had EV charging, when you go to the next place, you're going to look for the ones that advertise that. So it makes sense that that's something that's going to be more and more common. And it's like you can choose to ignore EVs, or you can get with the program.
Absolutely. And I think in a lot of ways, like Peninsula Clean Energy has the best solution here is that, okay, fine. If you don't like EVs, that's okay. You can not like EVs, but we can still provide you all the infrastructure to put this stuff in.
Right. Because
one day someone will probably have an EV here. I mean, California is still going forward with a 2035 ban on gas-powered vehicle sales. So we're heading that direction anyway. So it's just getting in front of that train.
Yeah, and I mean, it doesn't hurt. There's an outlet. And this is something I find is interesting, because I imagine that there are people that are like, we don't want an EV outlet, but it's like, you wouldn't care if there's like a plug on the wall.
Right.
As long as it's being paid for, like, somebody's not charging, off of it for free, and they're not. So there's just really no reason to oppose this.
Exactly, and I think it goes back to what we first started talking about, was like we looked at what people were doing in their single family homes, and again, they weren't using like a fancy charging station. They were just mostly getting a NEMA 1450 plug and plugging in at night, and that was it. And so it's a similar situation here.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, thank you for showing us this. We're really excited to learn more and more about Pando Electric. Hopefully there's more of these sites, some down in San Diego area. We'll go hunt them down and find them.
You'll be the first to know.
I actually just thought of one other thing. So we're in a condo complex. You're not just looking at condo complexes, you're looking at other types of...
Yeah, that's correct.
Like office buildings and...
Office buildings, hotels, and then apartment complexes.
Actually, hotels would be fantastic, because here, and this is sort of like a good illustration of like having 4 chargers at a hotel. Sounds great now, but if you're relying on that, and that's going to be like where I need to charge so that I can get to my next stop, it's free, it's a great perk, but if there's only 4, am I going to gamble that's going to be available? But if I know there's going to be 30 or 40 spots.
Right, and I think that's something I've heard time and time again from EV drivers going on road trips and staying at hotels, that they plan it out. They're like, I searched the hotels that have the EV chargers, and then when they get there, they get in a little late and they show up, they need the charge, and all the stations are full because there's only about 4 or 5.
It's like, Murphy's Law. Like when I didn't plan for it, the chargers were in use. When I did plan for it, all the chargers were empty.
Right.
So it was like, you just never know.
Yeah, and that's why we continue to advocate for a 1-to-1, like especially for new construction, every single spot should at least run the conduit.
Yeah, and the other thing is, and I said I was done, but I have more thoughts about it too, is like, because like the other thing is like these look very durable. There's not like a lot of things to break with the actual charger. It's like one of the things that I've seen, like one of the last hotels we were at in North Las Vegas, they had chargers where the cables were cut. But when you can do like this type of thing and secure the conduit, it's a little bit less of a maintenance worry for them.
It's not just less of a maintenance worry, it makes maintenance zero.
Yeah.
Because I tell people this all the time. how often do you maintain an outlet?
Right.
It's basically the only time you maintain it is when it's totally broken, then you just replace it.
Right.
And this is kind of the same situation. It's just an outlet. There's really nothing to take or steal. It's mounted to the wall. It is very durable. You could come in here and bang on it with a hammer if you really wanted to. Don't recommend doing
that. Please don't do that.
Yeah. But that's kind of like the idea, is to like really reduce any of the maintenance costs that are going back to the property. And it also helps EV drivers in a way, because let's say for whatever reason somebody did steal your cable or cut your cord, or you don't have one. Getting one is like 24 hours overnight from Amazon and $200.
Yeah.
If you damage that cable, that's a $200 to $600 part to replace, and then about 2 to 6 weeks before an electrician can actually come out on site and do the work. So you're looking at significant time of not having a charger. Whereas with this, 24 hours, you're back in business.
Yeah, and there's some ways that people have figured out to secure even the portable chargers as well. So we can dive into that in a different video.
I think that'd be a great video.
Like we've talked about, like you can like sort of loop it around through the wheel and things like that. It's a little bit complicated, but there's solutions. And if you're going to have someplace where you're charging every night, there's some ways. Like I could already see, like I could put a little cable around it to protect it a little bit.
Well, yeah, and these are our Gen 1 product. Our new Gen 2 product was actually coming out at the end of the year. We'll have a lot of that resolved, and we're cool. Super excited about it.
You're evolving. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, sounds like there's a lot of exciting stuff, more exciting projects. We want to stay in touch.
Absolutely.
And cover some more of this stuff, because I think this is a huge segment that needs to be addressed. Not only condos, but like workplace and hotels, and I would definitely add a hotel to my stay list if I knew they're going to have 30 versus 4 chargers. So very cool.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your time today.
No, thank you for yours.